Welcome to all of you, dear guests. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you to this webinar. We are very happy to welcome a diversity of professionals, either in your role as a principal or as an advisor in the arena of cross-border mid-market M&A. We, More Corporate Finance, we are dedicated to this area. A group of more than 100 M&A professionals in 14 countries. We advise, assist on a daily basis our clients, many of which are confronted with questions about buying, selling a company cross-border. That means with a counterpart who is not a compatriot. Cross-border M&A is adding extra complexity to the already heavily loaded agenda of any M&A transaction. We spontaneously think about other languages, other business habits, social behavior, different tax and legal systems, etc. But there is more to the specificity of cross-border M&A, as we will be elaborating during this seminar. Mid-market M&A in itself is also a specific niche, combining dynamics from small and medium enterprises and a multinational environment. In our experience, mid-market transactions are less subject to macroeconomic swings than the large deals, but they are definitely more than smaller transactions. Mid-market M&A has its own dynamics. Emotional intelligence is key in the mid-market, thus obviously proven track record, right tools, deal-making experience. But we also build our profession upon facts and figures. That's why we at More Global Corporate Finance commissioned a few years ago a dedicated research to Vlerick Business School. The objective of this research is to gain insight in the key drivers of cross-border mid-market M&A. We all know about the data shared by Merger Market and its likes, about the number of transactions, their pricing in a certain time period. Our objective now is to gain deeper insight in that segment, which is both cross-border and mid-market. A segment we just discussed that is living its own dynamics. I am extremely happy that Kerstin Fehre accepted the challenge to dig into the facts and figures in order for us to gain that insight. Kerstin is not only a professor of strategy at Vlerick Business School, but she has gained a wealth of knowledge and experience during her years as a consultant in the corporate finance community in Germany and abroad. A word of thank you too to Wenlin Hu, a bright young research explorer who assisted Kerstin Fehre, and to my fellow steering group members, Christoph Schlotthauer from More Cofra in France, and John Curry from More Kingston Smith in London. It was a pleasure to discuss, refine the research work during the process of analyzing data and challenging conclusions. Before handing over to Kerstin, I would like to mention 2 points of logistics to you that are important. First, during the seminar, we will be opening a Q&A box to collect your questions. This will be either answered by response on spot or by Kerstin at the end of the webinar. Thank you, Wan Lin and Michael Schellekens, for assisting us with this service. Michael Schellekens, who is a dedicated M&A mid-market partner with More Belgium. Second point of logistics, after the webinar, you will be receiving a link to an evaluation form. Please complete this form, as we are keen to learn. Learn from Vlerick, learn from the Compass, but also learn from your feedback. There's also another reward for having completed the survey, as this will give you access to the slides and to the recording of today's session. I hope all of us, we are ready now for the real stuff. I'm glad to give the floor to Kerstin Fehre, Professor of Strategy at Vlerick Business School, who will be guiding us through the insights gained, conclusions obtained from a More Global Corporate Finance mid-market cross-border M&A Compass. Kerstin, please let your light shine.
Thank you very much, Philip, for this nice introduction, and especially also introducing the main idea and the logic of our cross-border mid-market compass. Let me directly jump into the content, but first, what can you expect from this webinar? I will first introduce the main idea and the general concept of the compass very briefly, because Philip already mentioned it, but it is important to then also understand the logical flow of the results that we will present you and afterwards. So the core of this webinar will be, of course, about the findings of the compass, And why do we call this a compass? We call it a compass because we really want you to guide through this rather complex segment of cross-border mid-market M&A transactions that normally don't get that much attraction by other reports that focus mainly on the larger transactions. And then, as Philip already said, at the end of the webinar, you will also have the opportunity to ask questions, but also, please, throughout the webinar, as soon as you have a question, just use the Q&A box and we will try to answer the questions immediately. The main idea and general concept, what I just wanted to highlight really is like, it is a special segment. It is a niche, but extremely important segment. So in the compass, we are really focusing on the cross-border mid-market segment. This means that we analyze M&A transactions from two different perspectives, namely, we first segment the market into different deal sizes, the small, the mid, and the large market, and we focus on the mid-market. But then we further split the market and we really zoom into the cross-border, so by really differentiating between domestic deals and cross-border deals. So this means that the focus lies on this gray field here in the middle, the intersection between mid-market and cross-border transactions. Of course, we will put them into perspective of the total M&A. So this is why we decided to go for a three-tier logic in the report. So this means that we first put the cross-border mid-market segment into perspective of the entire M&A market. This part is also like a longitudinal analysis. We are comparing it with the previous 5 years. Then we really deep dive and zoom into the core of the study, namely the cross-border mid-market segment. And we analyze it from different perspectives to understand the trends and characteristics. So we look, for example, at continents, industries, and ownership analysis. And last but not least, we then focus really on the more global corporate finance geography, so the countries where more global corporate finance is active in. And also, again, there we go for a characteristic analysis. And this will also be the logic that we will apply now for the presentation of the results. I don't want to bore you with any technical aspects, but there are some things that you should keep to mind while listening to the results. So first of all, it is important to understand how do we define cross-border? What do we mean with this? So cross-border means that at least we have one acquirer, if we have multiple acquirers from a different country than the target company. Mid-market means that we focus on deals that have a deal value between 10 to 200 million euros. And M&A means that we are looking at those that acquire at least 15% of ownership. Maybe also important to know is that we focus only on completed deals. This means that we don't take into account any rumors, any announcements of deals that then in the end don't go through. There will be one section where we look also at announced deals, but the main part of the analysis is really built on completed, confirmed deals. So really to take out the rumors and all the noise that might be in the market. Data availability, we compare, we download the data always at the same time of the year, so to just make them comparable. We use multiple sources like Bloomberg, Sapphire, and so on and so on. And we define Europe as geographical Europe. So let's directly deep dive now into the findings of this year's report. Let's put the cross-border mid-market M&A segment into the perspective of the total M&A market. Here we compare the last 5 years. And what we can see here overall is, well, that probably not surprising for all of you as you're all active in the area. We see overall the decrease of M&A deals in total. We saw really like a recovery after the COVID year. So after 2020-21, we saw a huge increase and we were almost at the same level as in 2019 again. In 2023, we see a further decrease that we've already seen last year in 2020. And with this, we can say we are almost at COVID level again. There are two things or several things to discuss here. What we also see is, well, this is the overall M&A deal. Looking at the cross-border mid-market segment, this is the dark blue segment here. We see that it takes up a substantial part of the entire report, if we take into account the vast amount of deals, we can see that we are around 10%. It used to be higher. 5 years ago, we were at 12%. Now we are only at 9%. And we were, of course, interested to understand where does this decrease come from? Do we see maybe it is really coming from this cross-border element, that we see less international transactions? Is it effect of the market? That we also, like, due to the pressure on the larger deals, and then that we see like a shift from the different segments downwards to the smaller deals, and therefore we went further into the details, and we had a look at the cross-border small market segment. So we said, okay, let's see how the cross-border small market, so here now a different size segment, is evolving. And indeed, we see a similar trend. So also here, we see that it used to be 7% of the entire M&A market, and it is nowadays only 4%. So also here, we see a similar decrease. And then we said, okay, to further understand it, let's just have a look at this geographical perspective. So less at the size, but more at the geographical perspective. And also here we see that the cross-border element, the geographic perspective, is shrinking a bit. What can we conclude from this, especially then also for the cross-border mid-market segment? How can we explain the decrease? And there are several explanations. One explanation is really a technical one. So we have to keep in mind that we are downloading the data at the beginning of the year, in February. So the numbers for 2023 are those that we downloaded this year in February. But also for 2019, 2020, 21, and 22, we downloaded the data to this year in February. And of course, there's a fill-up, so especially for these niche markets, it's always difficult to find information. And we see that throughout the years, so even now in 2023, still information is, for example, entered into the database for 2020 for some deals where information was not available before. So this means it could be somehow a technical aspect that we see a little more information available in previous year, but still it will not explain the entire shift. And therefore we have several other explanations. So one explanation could be indeed that there is maybe what we hear a little bit about deglobalization, maybe a little shift of less cross-border transactions, but it could also be that we see a lot of follow-on transactions. So the companies go for a first transaction abroad, they build their local entity, they go for another acquisition in the same local market, but then this is done by this local entity and not by the prior home market mother company. So we have several explanations. Still, we think it is a super interesting and important and still relevant market, and this we will see in the coming slides. But first, let's also have now, so far we only looked at the number of deals. Now we see the average deal values, and also here, probably not surprising, we see that there was quite some pressure, especially also really like on the larger markets, but we see like a shift also in the other segments. So on our core segment here, the cross-border mid-market M&A, we see that the average deal values were still increasing from 2019 to 2021. So after the COVID year, we were at a record number of average deal value. After this is what decreasing, but still, if we compare now the average deal values of cross-border mid-market M&A, we see that it is 12% higher than it used to be 5 years ago. So we have still seen an increase compared to 5 years ago. However, also here we have to mention there is a technical aspect, because the way we define the different segments, there are limits. So if like cross-border mid-market deals would increase too much, they would then be considered as a large market, or if they are decreasing too much, they would be considered a small market. So there is anyhow only like a corridor in which the values can move on, develop. As I said, we are convinced that the cross-border mid-market segment is an extremely attractive market or interesting market. And this is now what we can see when we have a closer look at the market per se. So here what we did is we only looked at like market sizes first of all. So we compared large market, mid-market, small market. We took out the geographical perspective, and we see that the majority, more than 50% of deals are executed in the mid-market segment. However, of course, again, probably not surprising, the value is driven by the large market transactions. So we see that more than 80% of the deal value goes to large market segments, but still just seeing the numbers of transactions, we see that the mid-market segment is really a substantial one. If we add now the geographical perspective, we analyzed then, we added the cross-border element to the size perspective. We see that 62% of all cross-border deals happen in the mid-market segment. Yeah, so we see that this is really like, really like a core, like a really substantial segment, this mid-market segment. Again, also the value is then here also driven by the large market, but a little bit less than in when we take out the geographical element. Further focusing down, what we did, we said, okay, let's really like further analyze in both directions, starting from the mid-market segment. We see that when we look at the 54% of mid-markets compared to all other sizes, we see that 35% of these mid-market deals are cross-border deals. And if we perform this analysis from the opposite perspective, so we start with the geographical element, so we see that 30% of all deals are cross-border deals, and then within these 30% of cross-border deals, this is what we said already before, the cross-border mid-market segment is really like the most dominant one, so it's 62% within these cross-border that are then performed in the mid-market segment. I said that we are always looking at the completed confirmed deals, but of course we were interested to also understand how will the future look like. So we wanted to look a little bit into the crystal ball and see, wow, we see this decrease, what will the future bring? And for this, we now, for the coming analysis, we shifted to perspective and we analyzed announced deals, just to see whether we can read something from the announced deals, how the future might look like. And this we performed on a quarterly basis. So we looked at the announced deals throughout the past year. So in 2023, every quarter, how many deals were announced. And again, we performed this from the amount of deal perspective and from a deal value perspective, so numbers and values. And I would say we can probably, maybe very, very humble and be very careful, but we see some positive signals, especially as towards the end of last year, so towards Q4 2023, we see an increasing number of announced deals, and we see again also like an increasing amount of deal or like increasing deal value of those announced deals. We performed this then again on the several segments. So here you currently see M&A market in total, and then divided just by the size segment, so large market, mid-market, and small market. So the dark green line is the mid-market segment. On the next slide, we add again this geographical perspective to the size perspective. So our focus of interest is again on the dark green line, because this is a cross-border mid-market segment, and also here we see an increasing amount really like throughout the entire year of deals that were announced. And again, we see really like an increase of deal value, especially for this segment. And on the next slide, we just took out the large markets just to see a little bit like better the movements, because as soon as we have the large market, it is like depressing just the visual, just that we see a little bit the graphs better, and that we can better understand and grasp the movements of the cross-border mid-market. So here, as I said, carefully, very humble, but we see some positive signals for the year to come. Those of you, and let me just take a sip of water. Those of you that follow our report already for quite some time have probably seen that in the last editions, or the edition of last year, we added the topic of sustainability, because we wanted to understand whether sustainability is becoming a driver for M&A transactions. You all know EGS is currently a little bit everywhere, and we were wondering whether this becomes really like also a driver for M&A transactions. Last year, what we saw that indeed, when we analyzed the motif, like the statements on why a deal was performed, that sustainability was increasingly mentioned. So this is how the picture looked like last year. So really throughout all the different kind of possible segmentations, M&A in total, domestic versus cross-border, small, mid-market, large market, and then the combination of the geographical and the size segment, we saw that at a very low level, but still increasing, we saw that sustainability was more often mentioned. But here we also have to clarify, we don't know whether it's really like that they're saying, okay, but yeah, we are really doing more of it, or whether they're just communicating more about it, taking into account that these announcements that can be analyzed are quite often just several lines. They would probably not spend like this little amount of text that they have talking about sustainability if they would not really consider it as a motif. If they have other motifs that are more important, they will probably mention it. But still, we have to be careful in the interpretation. But overall, we saw at least that they consider it more important, whether they really do it or whether they just communicate more about it. However, the way I introduced it, you can probably already guess what happened this year. So this is now, we added this year's data. We did the same analysis as before. We analyzed how often the topic of sustainability was mentioned as a deal rationale. And we see that it is either stagnating, or even decreasing. And there are only two segments where we see that it is still increasing. This is domestic M&A, and it is large market M&A. And we have two possible explanations for this. For the large market, it is probably that they are more in the focus, that they are more under pressure to be active in sustainability activities. They need to act, they need to become more sustainable, because just the light is, or like the spot on the larger companies and the larger transactions. So maybe therefore they also look more for these opportunities because they need to change. And for the domestic market, it might be, as Philipp said also in his introduction, cross-border is an extremely complex topic. Cross-border, we do it often for learning perspectives. We want to learn about other markets, cultural perspectives, enter into a different region, and so on and so on. So therefore, these deals are probably considered. There are other reasons to go for cross-border than to become more sustainable. And therefore, we probably see in the domestic market still the increase where we don't see it in the cross-border. As in the cross-border, some other aspects are more important. Not to say that still sustainability could be important, but it's probably not the main motif. Let's now focus on the second tier, so really deep dive into the cross-border segment. So far we had like this longitudinal analysis. Now we really want to understand, who is acquiring what are the most active regions, and who is interested in what kind of industries. So this is what we will do now in the second tier. We have here a continental analysis. So we group all the different deals into the continents that are either the acquirer or the target are coming from. So at the top of the slide, so you see the continent of acquirers that are involved in cross-border deals, and at the bottom of the slide you see the continent of target that are involved in cross-border deals. And what we see here is that acquirers from the US are really dominating the market. The cross-border mid-market segment. So 40% or even more than 40% of cross-border mid-market deals are involved acquirers from North America. The second largest continent that is involved in cross-border transactions is Europe, and very closely followed from deals performed by acquirers from Asia. Looking at the target side, we see a similar but a little bit more balanced picture. So we see that also the US is the continent that attracts the most interest, but here we're only talking about 29% versus 28% of Europe, and 25% of targets coming from the Asian continent. So here we see indeed a little bit more balanced picture than on the question like where are the acquirers coming from. Still, there are some interesting movements if we compare it with deals from the previous years. So let me add this. So North American acquirers have always been the most active ones. However, so this is already our third edition of the Compass. Over the last editions, we see a decrease. Yeah? So in the first edition, the North American acquirers have even been more dominant. Last year, there were already like a minor or like a little decrease from North American, and we saw a shift from European acquirers. This year, we see a further decrease from North American acquirers, but this year we saw that the numbers, like the shift was more towards acquirers from Asia. What is also new, what has not been the case in the past, is that there is a high interest in targets from Oceania. So in the first editions, it was really like a very small amount of targets in cross-border deals coming from the region down under. And this year we saw really like an increase and a substantial increase of interest in these targets. Where is this increase coming from? This is what we actually then see in the coming slides. So we see that this is mainly driven by North American acquirers that have this year like an increase, in high interest in targets from the US. So what are we doing here in this analysis? We are deep diving into the specific continents. So on this slide, we are now focusing on North American acquirers in cross-border transactions, and we're trying to understand where are they coming from. Probably not surprising, majority of these North American acquirers are coming from the United States, followed by Canada, Cayman Islands, and others, but really the majority, of more than 80%, are coming from the United States. What are they interested in? United States this year for the first time, really like this huge interest in Australian targets, followed by UK, China, Israel, and Canada. And if we then look at, on the other side, at the top 5 targets of North American acquirers, we see a similar picture. We see also top 5 is Australia, China, United Kingdom. Here we see like just a switch in the order, but at a very low level. Canada and Israel. So probably not surprising because we have like this dominance of United States, so that in total for North America, it looks very similar. Where is this high interest for Australian targets coming from? We will see later in the industry analysis that it is mainly driven by an interest in targets from the metal segment, the metal industry. So like really like interested in raw materials, probably needed for electric batteries, for computers and phones, and so on, like these raw materials needed where Australia has a huge resource in the country. We now switch to the European continent, Europe as an acquirer continent, and here we see that a little bit more balanced picture compared then to the North American continent. And we see that the United Kingdom is the most active one, with almost 30% of the deals that involve an acquirer from the UK, followed by France, Germany, and then the Netherlands and Sweden. And here also we ask the question, okay, but in which countries are they interested in? And we see that they are mostly, in total, Europe is mostly interested in European acquirers. But if we look at United Kingdom, we see that they also go for shopping further away. So we see a high interest of targets from the UK, also in United States, also in Australia, and then followed by France, China, and Ireland. If we look at the European level, we see that European acquirers are probably more shopping in Europe. We see that here, like the top 5 targets from European acquirers that are involved in cross-border mid-market transactions, they are mainly interested in targets coming from the UK, Germany, United States as a third one only, but on a similar level than Germany and France, and then finally followed by Spain. And this is actually also a picture that we have seen in the past, that European acquirers are mainly interested in targets from Europe. Looking now at the European targets, so who else is interested in European targets? So we see first of all the top 5 target countries in Europe. are the UK, Germany, France, Spain, and Sweden. And then looking again, like question, okay, where are they coming from? Looking at the top 5 acquirer countries, namely the UK, we see that the acquirers, what we also already could see from the other perspective when we had a look at acquirers from United States, we saw that they had a huge interest in United Kingdom. This is now confirmed if we put it from the other way, looking at, okay, but if you have a look at United Kingdom, who are the acquirers? We see it's mainly coming 36% from the United States, followed by France, Australia, Sweden, and Germany on a very low level. Looking at then the European targets, also here, where are the acquirers coming from? And although I said like European acquirers are mainly interested in the European targets, we now also see that the interest in European targets also comes from the United States, something that we've also already seen when we had a look at it from the other perspective. So we see the acquirers of European targets are mainly coming from the United States, UK, France, Germany, and Luxembourg. If we now focus on the industry, because we were also, of course, interested, and I also already mentioned like this increasing interest in Australia and the industry that is connected with it. We had a look at where do the cross-border mid-market M&A transaction globally happen, in which sector. And here we see that more than half of the cross-border mid-market deals happen within the IT and the health sector. So IT and health care are really dominating, with 35% of the deals coming from IT, 16% of the deals coming from healthcare. However, if we compare it with previous years, so this is something that we've seen before, in the COVID surrounding, we saw, of course, even a higher interest in the healthcare market. But what is interesting, we see that the average deal values are less heated. Yeah? We saw higher average deal values in the past for IT and health. The highest average deal value is currently achieved in the banking, insurance, and financial services industry. So IT, health, in terms of numbers, still very attractive and very important. A lot of deals are happening there, but we see that the prices paid are not that overheated anymore. So this was on the global perspective, so cross-border mid-market on a global perspective. And now we have a separate look at the North American acquirers. So in which industries are the North American acquirers interested, and cross-border mid-market M&A within European targets. So the question for what industries do European targets get acquired? And for both perspectives, we see that IT and health are extremely important. They are also dominating. However, from the North American acquirer perspective, we see this high interest in the metal industry. And for the European targets, and also here, this is not only reflected in the fact that this is in the overview for the first time. It has not been there in the past, but also in this high average deal value paid for mid-market cross-border transaction in this industry, coming with North American acquirers involved. But on the other side, oops, sorry, that was too fast. And we see that from a European target perspective, they are indeed also acquired for IT and health. But here, industries, it's for machinery and equipment, and as well the banking and insurance and financial service industry, we see that higher average deal values are paid than for IT and health. Then a new analysis that we performed for the first time this year is we wanted to better understand who's actually driving these deals, who's standing behind these deals. So we had a look at the global ultimate owners of the acquirers. We were looking, okay, who is then really like behind the names that are acquiring, and we separated them in financial and non-financial buyers. We see that 37% are financial buyers, but the majority is coming from non-financial buyers, so 63%. And if we break these non-financial buyers further down, we see that the majority, so 75% of these non-financial buyers are really corporates. And then we see also a high interest from family or individual-owned owners, state-owned a little bit active, and we have like a very little amount of foundation and research institutes that will also be active. So here really we see these deals, the cross-border mid-market deals this year, majority coming from non-financial buyers, and these are mainly corporates, although with 37%, we can also say that the financial buyers, private equity, venture capital, and so on, have been quite active with almost 40% of the deals. Let's now focus a little bit more on the more global corporate finance geographies. Here we wanted to understand, first of all, are the more global corporate finance regions more on the acquirer or on the target side? And the interesting thing is that this year we see really like a balance. We went over the numbers several times because from a researcher perspective, if you see that you really have like equal numbers on both sides, you first of all get a little bit skeptical, but we checked it in all kinds of directions and analyzed it from different perspectives. So this year, indeed, we see that there is really like a balance. If we sum up all the different acquisitions that have been performed in the more global corporate finance regions or geographies, we see that they are balanced out. We see that the United Kingdom and France and Hong Kong, part of China, they are net acquirers, so mainly active as acquirers. Of course, also active at deals, but we see more on the acquirer than on the target side. Germany this year a net target. It has also been a net target last year. The previous year it was the other way around. Israel also a net target. Belgium a net acquirer. Poland net target. Czech Republic net target. Hungary net target, and Lithuania net target. I jumped over the Netherlands and South Africa. The Netherlands mainly because it has changed. So last year it was a net target. This year it is a net acquirer. And looking at the amount of deals that we have seen with either acquirers or targets involved from the Netherlands, I still feel comfortable to say, yeah, okay, we see a shift compared to last year. South Africa and Lithuania, we see that there is a difference of one deal. So therefore, and it has changed compared to last year, but we see only like this difference of one deal. So I don't feel comfortable to say like, okay, we see an overall trend or something that is really different to last year. Looking then really like at the trying to understand where the cross-border mid-market M&A deals in the more global corporate finance geographies, in which regions they are taking place. Probably not surprisingly, if we have a look at what we have seen in the previous slides, where we had really like this global perspective, we see that the United Kingdom is the, or like the acquirers from the United Kingdom are the most active ones, or were the most active ones last year, followed by France, Hong Kong, China, Germany, Netherlands, Israel, Belgium, South Africa, Poland, and so on. If we switch the perspective and have a look at the targets, also here we see United Kingdom, the most attractive, or not the most, the targets that were acquired most came from United Kingdom, followed by Germany, France, Israel, and the Netherlands, and further on. Also here, we wanted to understand where are the deals happening, in which industries, and similar to the global perspective, we see, and especially compared to the European perspective, we see still this high interest in IT and health. But then if we go and have a deeper look at zoom in into different countries, and here I would like to highlight 3 countries, but also in the report you will see that we have an overview for all countries where more global corporate finance is active. So ORLEC has an office because active all over the world. Yeah, we see for Belgium on the top. You see the top 3 countries from a country perspective. As a country perspective, on the wait a moment, for my side is the left side, so it should also be on the left side on your screens. We see the top 3 countries. We see that these targets from Belgium, they are as acquirers mostly active in United States, France, and Germany. If the Belgian companies are considered as a target in these cross-border mid-market transactions, we see that the top two countries here are the United States, United Kingdom, and Luxembourg. So high interest from a neighboring country, namely Luxembourg. Looking at the IT industry, looking at the industry again, also for Belgium, whether it is as a target or as an acquirer, we see this high interest in health and in IT. Actually, here we see a shift because you might remember in the previous analysis, we always saw that IT is a bit higher and health was second. For Belgium, in both directions, either acquirer or target, we see that health is dominating, then followed by IT. And probably not surprising, knowing Belgium, that there's also high interest. The third most important from a target perspective is the food, beverage, and tobacco industry. From an acquirer perspective, also high interest in machinery and equipment. We also deep dived on France, and here again, similar to what we have seen on the slides before, when we had a look at the global perspective, we see this high interest from United Kingdom, United States, and Germany, and United States and United Kingdom holds true for both perspectives, either as an acquirer or as a target. And from an acquirer perspective, we see that's interest in Germany, and as a target, we see that's interest coming from the Netherlands as third most important country. Looking at the top three industries, also here again, IT and health dominating in both perspectives, and then for both perspectives, also the machinery and equipment industry or sector is dominating, or is the third most important one. And last but not least, we also deep dived into the UK. Similar to the geographical perspectives that we had on a global perspective, we see this United States. We mentioned Australia already, and France. And again, for the top three industries, IT and health, and here really like dominating the IT perspective, IT industry, and from an acquirer perspective, also the banking, insurance, and financial services industry, and from a target perspective, also the machinery and equipment. Let me just look, I think we are perfect in time. So let me conclude, because I know it is an extremely complex report and this might be now a completely overwhelming in terms of information. So let me conclude, let me summarize, but I can also only recommend you to really have a look at the report, because there's so much more in there. And even when I put the summary together, I felt a little bit bad, because I said like, okay, now I try to press all this vast amount of information into one slide, but I try to really highlight the most interesting and most important findings for the year 2023, so the report that was published some weeks ago. So we see that the total M&A activity, so here now really speaking at total M&A activity, is at the COVID level again for this year in terms of numbers, the amount of, in terms of amount deals concluded. But not only the numbers of deals decreased, we also saw that the average deal values decreased, so they became under pressure. Cross-border mid-market remains a niche, but still an essential segment for the total M&A cross-border M&A market. We see that 35% of all mid-market M&A deals are cross-border. We see 62% of all cross-border deals that took place are happening in this mid-market segment. So whether we turn it from the one or the other perspective, we see that it is really like a substantial segment. And we see that the average deal sizes has grown from like 5 years ago to now 47.4 million in 2023. And this represents a rise of 12% compared with what we've seen 5 years ago. So here also like a confirmation that this is really like an important and an essential segment in the total M&A market. The quarterly analysis that we performed, where we say, okay, what about the announced deals? Provides a humble recovery outlook. Let's see how this year will evolve and what we will find out next year around this time. We see that this year there's the first time really like this high interest in targets from Australia, and this is mainly coming from North American acquirers. There is a high interest in targets from IT and healthcare, really like throughout all kind of analysis, but the average deals values were less heated than in previous years. With this, I would like to conclude and hand over to the Q&A. So I could not see the Q&A box. I guess there were quite some questions. If you have further questions, I'm more than happy to answer them right now.
Thank you so much, Kerstin. Let me jump in. It's clear that you have an incredible talent of translating a vast amount of data into clear insights, which also leads to a quite empty Q&A box. So there are no questions for the time being. Nonetheless, I found it very interesting, and there are some general evolutions in society and economics, and that I would like to link to the report if possible. So I've got a question myself for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
In general, we see that M&A activity tends to suffer from high interest rates and from uncertain economic environments, which is clearly the case today. And specifically, if we look at private equity firms, they are more focused often not on a very long term in a strategic way, but more on financial performance. And also often heavily leveraged. So I was wondering whether there's some evidence in your report that shows us that based on the economic environment we are having today, that private equity firms may be less active today than they were before, or whether there's some evidence in your research that can support one of these things, whether they are less active based on these environments.
Yeah. Michael, I agree. It is an extremely relevant question, and I would love to have a very concrete answer driven by data and numbers. Unfortunately, this is a question that I cannot answer based on the report because we added this ultimate ownership analysis for the first time this year. So therefore, I don't have any longitudinal analysis or not even a comparison to previous year. So let's see also maybe like how this evolves in the coming years. So therefore, based on the report, unfortunately, I cannot provide any empirical evidence saying here, based on these more than 36,000 deals that we analyzed, this is and that what we see. But let me just add my perspective from interactions that we have. So on the one hand, we are also interacting with private equity firms. Our students, I have quite some students who are interested to work in M&A and private equity. I agree, it might be driven. I already heard that I'm a little biased to my experience and background, that I always try to convince them that this is the most interesting sector. And I always tell them, if you really want to work in strategy, go for private equity and M&A. So here, and also like we invite, of course, a lot of these companies, we have conversations with them, and they all say this year it is difficult. Also from a hiring perspective, they are all a little bit hesitant. So they rather offers internship than really like a full offer. So there I would say, yes, indeed, we see less activity than in previous years. However, also from these conversations, and especially also the conversations that I had with Philip and John and Christoph, I have the feeling there is still something out there. It is, I mean, you mentioned before that I was also working in M&A. I think I've seen worse times. So I have the feeling there's a little bit like this, we are looking for something, and who's the first, who dares to get out? We don't see like for these structured deals, but there is, we will probably see a shift in the kind of deals. And there is still potential available, and we see also activities. It is not that the market is completely dead, but rather we see probably a shift in the kind of deals. Okay. I don't know whether our audience who is directly working in this industry agrees.
I think that's what we see as well, like a mixed bag of some serious dry powder in the industry still there, and actively looking for investments at the same time, some reluctance and some prudence in investing itself is what we feel as well, I think, from our side. Just looking at the time, maybe shall we do one additional one?
Yes, please go ahead.
A little bit the same of putting into the context we're having today. There's lots to do about European economic support programs, in the sense that there are some large trading blocs and serious players, US, China, that have quite some support in those countries to boost the economy, and the European Union struggling to see what we could do to to boost the European economics. Also a little bit some rumors about a fear that these countries, lots of support within the country, try and buy well, promising companies abroad. And I was wondering whether there's something in the report that indicates that these kind of countries are very active in acquiring companies in Europe, for example.
Again, unfortunately, a question that I cannot answer based on the data that we have in the report, because as you might know, it is a descriptive report. It is a descriptive analysis. For these kind of questions, we would have to run multivariate analyses where we then control for several factors. And unfortunately, like especially in this sector, the data is not really available. But still, let me try to share my my view on this. Maybe I'm again biased because I strongly believe in a market logic and in an industry-driven perspective. And from the deals that we analyzed, I have the feeling that it's really like more driven by the interest, like the healthcare, IT, due to digitalization. I also see in the chat box that we have an additional question on healthcare, and I will come to this. There I think there is an industry logic behind, or also like this increasing or interest, like this surprising high interest in Australian targets this year. However, we could also say like, okay, we see it in two perspectives, because looking at the support program from the US, we still see like, okay, at least from an acquirer perspective, US is getting less active, but I don't know whether they really get less active or whether it's just more like we see more activity from the others. And if there's more activity from the others, it's difficult to say where it's really coming from. Also, like, because we have a look at the continent perspective. So, for example, Asia. Well, Asia could be China, could be Japan, Indonesia, and wherever. So it is really difficult. So, but still, I think the most shifts that we've seen, I would tend to analyze to answer this from a like a market logic than from a support logic, because we see really like both movements.
That's a very good one. If we get some, we got quite some minutes left, so I'd like to get to the first question we get in the Q&A box by Anna, a colleague from our UK office, was raised the question why our healthcare has become such an interesting sector for acquirers across the most markets. Whether there's some insights you can share.
Yeah. Also here, I think I would like to share like two perspectives. I think first of all, the COVID crisis showed us something that we should probably all be aware of, but in the end we became much more aware of due to COVID, that health is really like the most important aspect that we all have. And I think this really reminded us, and this is where we then suddenly saw like this huge interest. I spoke to M&A advisors during COVID time, and they were just driving crazy. And they said, well, everyone reaches out and asks like, where is there still a biotech or healthcare company left that we could acquire? Just really like trying to get on this. This is what, and then we also probably saw like in these heated prices. But still, I think there is also like from an industry perspective, quite a lot of things going on. So from a research perspective, we see that really like these global challenges, like the global grand challenges that we see, especially then also when it comes to healthcare, like for example, cancer. Like there's a lot of research on cancer where we somehow have this feeling that there might be a breakthrough. Diabetes, this immunity against antibiotics. Everywhere we have like this increasing research activity, a lot of biotech startups that really focus on a specific segment of the market, and with this probably then also get to a kind of a breakthrough. And I think there we see that everyone tries to still participate and to move this forward. And therefore I feel like, well, the one is probably COVID reminded us, but on the other hand, we also see like this increasing, forward movement in terms of from a research perspective, combined with these global grand societal challenges that we have.
Great. There's one additional question. It's quite technical, which has been answered by Wan Lin in the meanwhile. So that's a good thing. Great. So if that's okay, I think we're getting to the end of this webinar. So I'd like to pass the floor to Philippe, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for providing me this opportunity to share our results. And I'm really grateful that we have this research cooperation with Moore to work on such an interesting topic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kerstin, and Van Lin. It is interesting. It is not only interesting because it's at our heart every day when we advise clients, when we advise people, not only clients, just people, entrepreneurs, management teams. It is at our heart to have insight in cross-border M&A, in the mid-market M&A. I'm very happy that it's now the third year in a row that we collaborate on this compass. We are getting deeper insight. We're getting historical data, which gives us tendencies. So I'm looking forward to next year's conclusions. Thank you also to everybody who participated in this webinar, to the questions. I'll invite you to answer the evaluation survey that will be following. Again, with a reward, because it will be giving you the slideshow and the recording of the webinar. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you very soon again. And thank you again, Kerstin. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Van Lin. Thank you all, and see you soon.